I'm going to marry your sister. ATM is no longer needed. I could hear the mocking laughter over the phone. But I didn't let out a surprised sound. I thought if I played into their hands, it would weaken my position. And by now, I had not an iota of love left for my husband, Zach. Okay, brace yourself. I replied calmly, but inside, anger was boiling over. Zach, who dumped all the childcare, elder care, and housework on me, was enjoying an affair with my sister, Nicole. And Nicole too, after borrowing all that money from me, she slept with my husband and even called me an ATM at the end. It was unforgivable. You're okay with us divorcing, right? When Zach pressed me, I simply nodded yes. On the other end of the phone, the two of them cheered. Enjoy it while you can. There's no way they won't get their comeuppance for belittling me like this. I bit my lip hard. My name is Maggie. I'm 60 years old, living with my husband Zach, who's 5 years my senior. Our son, Alan, is 30 this year, already independent and out of the house. I was working part-time at a grocery store until recently, but due to the recent surge in prices, I was forced into early retirement for cost-cutting. The manager, who was very kind since I worked there for many years, even gave me a severance package despite being part-time. It's a bit sad to retire before reaching the age of retirement, but working at the grocery store definitely helped me grow. So I'm very grateful to the manager who continued to employ me. One might think I'm set for a slow life in retirement, but actually, I'm having some domestic issues. Well, more with Zach than with the household. With our loveless and distant marriage, I'm very anxious about living together for many more years. Why did it come to this? Let me start from the beginning. I met Zach over 40 years ago. Back then, I was a student job hunting, talking to various industry veterans. Most of them were seniors from the newspaper club I was part of. At a club drinking party, many alumni, including Zach, would show up. Maggie, what kind of company do you want to work for? Zach, rumored to be the handsome senior in the club, asked me with a comfortable distance. I honestly told him I wanted to work for a stable company. How about the bank I work at? Banking's probably the most stable, right? Indeed, it seems like a solid job. While my response was cliché, I was happy Zach invited me to his bank. Encouraged by Zach, I applied to his bank and got the job. It wasn't too difficult as the bank hired many students from my university. Once I started working at the bank, I realized many women liked him. Zach, always invited out for meals after work, seemed out of reach for me. But Zach often asked me out, and despite feeling guilty towards his other admirers, I started going out with him more as I was interested. So, we started dating and got married 3 years later, after which I quit the bank. It's regretful to quit just after 4 years, but back then, most women quit upon marriage. Especially since Zach and I were in the same workplace, he seemed to prefer I work part-time elsewhere. I had no regrets about marrying Zach and quitting my job. For a while, we enjoyed our life together until I got pregnant and gave birth to our son, Alan, at 30. Zach, who used to treat me like a princess, suddenly became indifferent after the birth. Zach, can you make a bottle for Alan? A bottle? That's a mom's job. Why do I have to do it? His sudden change in attitude left me more in shock rather than in sadness or anger. I had heard that men sometimes lose interest when their wives give birth. But I thought that was a story for only a small fraction of couples. I never imagined that Zach, who loved me so much, would suddenly cast me aside like throwing something into the open sea after I had our child. From then on, every day was a whirlwind. Zach continued to refuse to help with the baby. Taking care of the baby is a mom's job. Plus, you're a housewife, so it's natural for you to take care of it. I'm busy with work. Zach had his plausible reasons, but they didn't satisfy me. But it's my first time too, and raising the baby alone is hard work. As I countered while watching Zach's reaction, he glared at me. If it's that hard, why don't you go to my dad's? Dad's free and can help you out. To your father? Yeah, that's right. I was utterly shocked by Zach's suggestion. Zach's mom had passed away early, and only his dad, Bob, was left, who recently had trouble with his legs and might need to go to a care facility. How could he think of leaving our child with Bob? Moreover, Zach completely refused to be involved with the baby, essentially just dumping it on his parents. Zach's outlandish idea left me troubled. Since then, I received little help from Zach in raising Alan, and I had to do it alone, repeatedly reading childcare books. Fortunately, Alan was a well-behaved and obedient child, who listened to me and grew up healthy. When Alan turned 5, after sending him off to kindergarten, I noticed a call on my mobile phone. "Maggie, it looks like Dad collapsed. I'm thinking of putting him in a facility. Can you handle the paperwork?" "What? Collapsed? Is he okay? And about the facility?" I was very surprised by Zach's call. The news of Bob's collapse was alarming. I hoped he had been taken to the hospital in time. Given Bob's leg condition, it must have been quite a struggle. Bob had always been fond of me, treating me like his own daughter, and I regularly took Alan to visit him, even without Zach asking. The in-laws' house was about a 40-minute drive from our home. Every time we visited, "Thank you for coming all this way," Bob would say with a kind smile. Alan and I both loved Bob and, despite the distance, always wanted to visit him again and again. Hearing that Bob had collapsed, I was filled with anxiety, but Zach only mentioned putting him in a facility in a matter-of-fact tone, which irritated me. "Just handle it, I'm busy with work, okay?" "Wait a minute." Zach cut the call quickly after saying his piece. The idea of putting Bob in a facility was unthinkable to me. Unless it was Bob's own wish, it seemed like Zach was just deciding to put him in a facility on his own. After much thought, I decided to take care of Bob myself as soon as he recovered. When I arrived at the hospital where Bob had been sent, he was in the hospital room and had already regained his consciousness. Bob was over 70 but had struggled to continue the family's farming business despite his leg issues. Both Zach and I had asked Bob to rest, but he insisted on going to the field that day. "Maggie, sorry for troubling you." "No, please, just don't strain yourself anymore." "All right." It seemed Bob had learned his lesson this time and stopped going to the field after being discharged. Bob's field was no longer used for crops, leaving only an empty land. Though it could be revived with care, the land would probably be passed on to Zach, his only son, who I doubted would take up farming. I felt sorry for the neglected field but thought it was for the best if it meant Bob wouldn't strain himself further. After that, I started caring for Bob, visiting the in-laws' house about 3 times a week. I also began working part-time at the grocery store around that time, juggling work, childcare, caregiving, and household chores. For childcare, I switched Alan from kindergarten to daycare with extended hours, managing to make time. I worked 4 mornings a week till after lunch and then went to the in-laws' house. After caring for Bob, I would pick up Alan from daycare, go home, and make dinner. It was very challenging initially due to inexperience. Though it became slightly easier as I got used to it, I didn't realize how tired I was becoming. I had no time to talk to Zach and was overwhelmed just dealing with the tasks at hand. 10 years passed in this manner, and I turned 45, Zach 50. By then, Alan had become a teenager and often rebelled against me. But I saw this as a sign of his growing independence and, while feeling a bit lonely, I was happy about his growth. However, Alan never showed any defiance towards Zach. In fact, he hardly ever spoke to him. Zach had abandoned any childcare responsibilities from Alan's birth, leaving everything to me, so it seemed Alan didn't really think of Zach as his dad. It was around this time that our loveless and distant family relationship reached a critical point. The catalyst was a call from my sister, Nicole. "Hi, Maggie. I just got back from a trip to Hawaii with friends and I've got some souvenirs for you. Can I drop by your place?" Nicole, my elder sister by 3 years, has always been reckless with money and had a fiery temperament, making us quite incompatible. She always wore flashy makeup and was more beautiful than me. I was suspicious of her intention to give me souvenirs but couldn't refuse her kind gesture and agreed. When Nicole came over the weekend, she handed me the souvenirs, which I realized were not from Hawaii and were clearly common sweets available locally. I chose to stay silent, thinking that pointing this out would only upset her. "Hey, Maggie. I'm short on cash this month. Can you lend me some money?" Suddenly visiting with a fake souvenir and now this, I wondered what she was up to. "Lend you money? Why?" I suspected it was just Nicole's usual spending habits leaving her broke. "Well, I've been feeling unwell lately. The doctor said I might need to be hospitalized. But I don't have insurance and can't afford the hospital and treatment costs." Nicole, sounding feeble, left me speechless. What kind of illness required hospitalization? I silently stared at Nicole, who looked at me pleadingly. "Okay. Just pay me back after your treatment." "Thanks. Sisters are the best." Nicole's face lit up as she shook my hand. Despite our differences, she was my sister and I wanted her to get well soon if she was ill. "By the way, when is Zach getting back?" Once Nicole knew I'd lend her the money, she casually asked this. "Zach just went to the grocery store." "Oh, I see. I'll just say hi then and leave." Right then, the front door opened and Zach returned. "Hey, Zach." "Oh, Nicole. You're here." "Yes, just had something to discuss with Maggie. But I'm done now and will be leaving." As Nicole stood up and passed by Zach, she seemed to whisper something in his ear. After Nicole left, "What did Nicole say to you earlier?" I asked, but "Nothing important." Zach evaded the question. I remained curious but soon forgot about it. The discovery of Zach and Nicole's affair happened a month later. I planned to visit Bob that day, but work got extended, so I postponed my visit to the in-laws' house to the next day and went home as usual. Alan was at the library, so only Zach should have been home. "Why are there women's shoes here?" As I took off my shoes at the entrance, I noticed a familiar pair of heels. They were the high heels Nicole wore over the weekend. Entering the house, the living room was empty, which relieved me momentarily. But then, from the bedroom, I heard faint, indiscreet voices of Zach and Nicole. "What are they doing?" I considered confronting them right then but hesitated at the last moment. What if Zach demands a divorce after being exposed? Alan wouldn't want to live with Zach. But I wasn't confident I could afford Alan's education fees alone. If we were to divorce, I wanted to wait until Alan had graduated from college. Frustrated, I decided to leave the house, pretending I saw nothing. Instead, I gathered evidence of the affair, taking photos of their traces and secretly saving the exchanges between Zach and Nicole from his mobile phone. It appeared they had been having an affair for about 6 months. Despite the anger boiling inside me, I reminded myself it was for Alan and endured, not exposing the affair. Another 15 years have passed since then, and Alan is now part of the working world. After graduating from college and leaving his first job early, Alan set up his own business and is now working hard as its president. And as the story goes, I had retired from the grocery store, but I was working a little at Alan's company. I had been giving Nicole money for her treatment bit by bit, but when her requests became too persistent, I grew reluctant to lend more and started ignoring her calls. In fact, the signs of Nicole and Zach's affair had disappeared about a year after it came to light. Zach probably got bored of Nicole. He changed his mind and chose to stay married to me. Knowing this, I couldn't bring myself to pursue the matter of the affair anymore and decided to pretend it never happened. But I realized my naivety when I heard about Bob's death. I got the news about Bob from Zach during the day. Bob had lived a long life until 95, but I was deeply shocked by the loss of Bob, who I had cared for so long. Bob, unlike Zach, was kind and considerate, so his passing felt like losing my own parent. Yet even then, Zach said, "Dad seems to have accumulated a lot of wealth, so that's exciting." Laughing. I was so angry that I thought of giving Zach a piece of my mind, but then I heard a woman's laughter from nearby. Oops, did she realize we're together? I was chilled to the bone at the sound of Nicole's voice. Had Nicole and Zach's relationship not ended after all? For 15 years, they had continued their affair without my knowledge. Realizing this, they seemed like an incomprehensible entity to me. I'm going to marry your sister. ATM is no longer needed. I could hear the mocking laughter over the phone. But I didn't let out a sound of surprise. I thought if I played into their hands, it would weaken my position, and by now, I had not an iota of love left for Zach. Okay, brace yourself. I replied calmly, but inside, anger was boiling over. Zach, who dumped all the childcare, elder care, and housework on me, was enjoying an affair with Nicole. And Nicole too, after borrowing all that money from me, she slept with my husband and even called me an ATM at the end. It was unforgivable. You're okay with us divorcing, right? When Zach pressed me, I simply nodded yes. On the other end of the phone, the two of them cheered. Enjoy it while you can. There's no way they won't get their comeuppance for belittling me like this. I bit my lip hard. After Bob's funeral, I filed for divorce as promised. When I informed Zach, he seemed so delighted that it felt like he was doing it on purpose. Now that we're divorced, you should leave this house as soon as possible. Me leave? I asked, surprised, and Zach nodded as if it were obvious. I'm going to live with Nicole, and you'll be living alone. This house is too big for one person. Anger turned to disbelief, and I said, okay. Too weary to argue, and agreed to Zach's demands. Though upset, I had already considered my living situation before the divorce. Leaving our home, I headed to Alan's, who was living independently. I had contacted Alan beforehand, and he welcomed his mom, who had just left Zach, with open arms. He's truly a kind son. I resolved to work even harder at Alan's company. A few days later, a man claiming to be a lawyer contacted me. When I went to the specified location, Zach, Nicole, and the lawyer were seated. I am in possession of a will left by Zach's dad, the lawyer said, and took out the will signed by Bob from his bag. I was surprised as I didn't know Bob had left a will. As Zach's only child, he was the legal heir to Bob's assets. Being no longer Zach's wife, I had no claim to any inheritance. Why was I called then? As I wondered, the lawyer read the will. Its contents were astounding. Bob had left half of his assets to me. That meant the field Bob owned was now part of my estate. While Zach would inherit the other half due to his legal share, he had surely not expected me to inherit anything. Why does Maggie get half of the inheritance? I'm his only son, I should receive it all. Dad was very grateful to Maggie for her selfless care, even though they were not related by blood. He meant it as a thank you. Bob. I was deeply moved by Bob's thoughtfulness. What the heck is this? I thought we could finally relax with the inheritance. Nicole twisted her face in frustration. The lawyer then mentioned that Bob's will had also left all of his debts to Zach, but it seemed Zach and Nicole were too upset to hear that part. I was overwhelmed with gratitude towards Bob, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face. Thank you, Bob. Seeing me in tears, the two of them seemed to grow even angrier, but the lawyer concluded. That is the content of the will. With that, Zach and Nicole seemed to snap back to reality. I'm not happy about losing half, but hey, we still have half of the inheritance left. Gotta thank the law for that. Zach said as he patted Nicole's shoulder, who nodded in agreement, right. Well, we'll be leaving now. We won't have anything to do with you anymore, so take care. They laughed loudly as they left. I returned to Alan's house, savoring Bob's last act of kindness. After receiving the inheritance from Bob, I continued working at Alan's place without incident, and before I knew it, 2 months had passed. That's when Zach called me, on a Sunday. Alan and I were both off work, relaxing at home, but my mobile phone started ringing insistently. Zach! The air froze between me and Alan as we realized it was Zach calling. Why is Dad calling? He abandoned you, and now what does he want? You don't have to answer. Alan said so, but the phone kept ringing persistently. Irritated, I decided to answer to silence Zach. What is it, calling me repeatedly? You said we wouldn't have anything to do with each other ever again. I answered with a tone of annoyance, but Zach seemed not to hear me and started talking frantically. Hey, what's going on? Why are you working at Alan's company? And why is Alan's company being featured on TV? And what's with showing your fancy house? Zach's near-hysterical voice echoed through the phone, causing Alan to frown. You saw the TV. I realized why Zach was calling all of a sudden. Recently, a TV station had interviewed Zach's gym, and it was broadcast yesterday. Alan's gym, which combines a gym and cafe, had caught the TV station's interest due to its novelty. Since opening, the gym had rapidly increased its membership, and Alan appeared on TV as a successful young entrepreneur, even showcasing our home as Zach mentioned. The house we live in now, Alan's home, is quite luxurious, far surpassing the neighboring houses in size. So Zach saw Alan's house and was shocked enough to call. What do you mean you guys are living in such a big house? Over here, Nicole used up all of Dad's inheritance, and I even got left with his debts. Damn it, I didn't hear about that from the lawyer back then. Zach yelled angrily over the phone. But back then, the lawyer did mention that Bob had left all his debts to Zach. It wasn't my fault that Zach had not listened, and it was none of my business. It's none of my business, Zach. The lawyer clearly mentioned it, and it's your responsibility for not paying attention. Besides, you knew about Nicole's spending habits even before marrying her, right? I gave her money for treatment and haven't been repaid yet. This just proves to me that you and Nicole are the worst kind of people, quick to betray someone you should trust. In response to my correct argument, Zach remained silent, unable to say anything. Besides, isn't it all your fault for cheating on me in the first place? I just don't understand why I have to be blamed. I let out my pent-up frustrations, feeling somewhat relieved. Realizing he couldn't blame me, Zach suddenly changed his tone to a pleading one. Please, Maggie. I'm begging you, lend me some money. I was supposed to get a retirement fund this year, but I got fired, and all I'm left with are Dad's debts. Nicole left after we argued about money. How am I supposed to live now? You're my only hope. I admit I was wrong about everything. I apologize. Just give me a little bit of Dad's inheritance. You're living a good life with Alan, right? Think of it as helping someone out, okay? His nerve to beg his ex-wife for money after cheating and leaving her was beyond comprehension. Alan, who had been listening to the conversation, looked at me, seemingly wanting to say something. I handed my mobile phone to Alan. Alan turned on the speaker and firmly said to Zach, Dad, you betrayed Mom and married Nicole, right? And I heard you never took care of me since I was born. I don't have any memories of playing with you after I became aware. It was always just Mom and me. On Parents' Day and Sports Day, it was always just Mom who came. That's why I'm helping Mom with my company and living with her. Why should I, who you never did anything for, lend you money? My only parent is Mom. I won't give you a single dollar. Alan's strong, businesslike tone choked me up. I could sense Zach gasping on the other end of the phone. Alan, how could you say that to your dad? Fine, I won't rely on you guys ever again. Don't insult me. With that, Zach hung up. We looked at the silent mobile phone and then burst out laughing together. Zach begged us for money, and now he says he won't have anything to do with us. What an idiot. Yeah. Dad has always been like that, getting angry without thinking ahead. As we discussed Zach's foolishness, the phone rang again. It was Zach. He probably wanted to ask for money, despite saying he wouldn't contact us again. Fed up, I blocked Zach's contact. That's it. Now that fool can't bother us anymore. Yeah. Thanks, Mom. His gratitude for being raised seemed implicit. I should be the one thanking you. You've given me such a great life. No matter how old you get, you're still my precious son. We reaffirmed our bond as mother and son, grateful for each other's presence in our spacious home. A few days later, my sister Nicole called me. Her request was almost identical to what Zach had said. I couldn't fathom lending more money to Nicole, who hadn't even repaid what she owed me. In fact, I hadn't yet demanded compensation for her affair with Zach, so I successfully sued both of them for damages through a lawyer. They ended up getting divorced after being married. Their marriage only lasted for 2 months. Zach was even worse off than Nicole. The negative inheritance he received from Dad was too substantial. Bob had borrowed a lot of money for farming, managing it all by himself. I hadn't known about it. While caring for Bob, he often complained about Zach. Bob was able to forgive Zach for not taking over the farming business, but the fact that he didn't take care of Alan and not visit his own father was unforgivable. He was also furious with the way Zach treated me, and I always tried to soothe him, saying it was okay. If kind Bob was that angry, Zach must have been quite a negligent son. All of Zach's expected retirement funds were gone due to his dismissal for misconduct. Rumor has it he even tried to embezzle money from his bank to pay off his debts. Had he just worked quietly until the end, he would have received his retirement money. His greed was his downfall. Now, while receiving a pension, he seems to be working 3 part-time jobs to pay off his debts. Starting a new job at 65 and being taught by younger people as a newcomer must be shattering his pride. Although he has worked as a bank employee for many years, his part-time job as a new employee involves a lot of odd jobs. A hard adjustment for someone who never did housework, childcare, or elder care. He'll likely give up soon enough. For Zach, who neglected his son and cheated with Nicole for years, it's a fitting punishment. I hope he manages until the end. As for me, I'm still working energetically at Alan's workplace. The staff, who are around my child's age, treat me very kindly. Our workplace is always full of smiles, attracting many customers. Alan recently got engaged to a girl a year younger than him and introduced her to me. She's a wonderful, sensible young lady. Well respected at work. I was planning to move out when they married, but she insisted we live together. I'm grateful for her kindness and looking forward to our future together.